All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday afternoon. This is the Atlas Carbon webinar around key questions you should be asking yourself before starting a carbon project. My name is Ashley Silver. I'm the CEO of Atlas Carbon, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sean Hoobin, who is the Director of Carbon Services for Atlas Carbon. For those who are new to us, Atlas Carbon is a soil carbon project developer really focused on the how of building soil carbon. We use our tools and support team with our partnership through Maya Grazing in order to support graziers in those day-to-day key decisions that will develop soil carbon over time. But it is an exciting day for soil carbon here in Australia. I'm hoping many of you have seen the news announced through Beef Central about some of the first families who are going to be paid for their soil carbon project through the ERF. We're really pleased to see that those first families were Maya Grazing customers. So they've been working with Maya Grazing for the past few years. We spoke with one of them yesterday just to hear about how Maya Grazing helped them with their project. And they mentioned the elements of, using the tool to help them match stocking rate to carrying capacity, to help analyze their data and track their data, all of which was also required for their soil carbon project reporting. So congratulations to those families. I'm sure we'll be hearing more news throughout the week. As I mentioned, this is the third in a series that Atlas Carbon has put on around soil carbon projects. The first we ran was on the cost benefit report and the key considerations around the revenue or value and costs of doing a carbon project on your property. Thanks to those who have sent through EOIs to be considered for a cost benefit report. We'll be following up with you in the coming week on those requests. And then the last webinar we held was around the Atlas Carbon Blueprint Program, which is a 6-month program that provides an in-depth on-the-ground assessment of your property's potential to be successful in a soil carbon project, paired with support to start understanding the basic practices and practice adoption that would be required as part of the additionality requirements for a soil carbon project. But today, we're talking about, once you get to that stage, what are the 9 questions you should be asking yourself when you're considering a soil carbon project? Hopefully the recent announcement on these first payments coming out will get people starting to think more deeply about the potential here. But we know that carbon projects aren't for everyone. And so hopefully this webinar will give you some introductory pointers when you start considering this for your property and your business. I'm going to pass over to Sean, who's going to kick us off.
Excellent. Thanks, Ashley. I will just share my screen, and Ashley and I will run through some of the key questions. Alrighty, so what you need to know before starting a soil carbon project. Obviously, making a commitment for 25 years is quite significant. So you want to cover off all the key questions and get the key information so you can make an informed decision. Soil carbon projects, there is a lot of upside for graziers. It can increase your land's productivity. You can earn additional revenue through carbon credits. And some of this money can go to funding the transition for your property aspirations. And I suppose one of the key things about a soil carbon project is there isn't any trade-off between having a carbon project where it impacts on your grazing. With a soil carbon project, building soil carbon brings the ACCUs, but also helps your productivity. So I suppose that's one key benefit of a soil carbon project. But it isn't all upside. There are things you have to look at. There are costs, there are risks, there are project requirements you need to understand up front. So these are the kind of questions we're going to run through so you can get a better idea of if a soil carbon project is the right choice for your business. These are the 9 questions we're going to run through. We're going to summarize some of the previous stuff we did in the cost benefit presentation and the blueprint presentation, but then also talk about the the support you might need, and particularly the requirements of a soil carbon project. So let's jump into it. Ashley, I might pass over to you for the next few slides.
All right. So to kick off, first question, is my property high potential for a soil carbon project? There's a few things we consider when we first start looking at properties, a key element of which is rainfall. We tend to look at properties that have 500 mils of rainfall or more, which demonstrates the potential for carbon not only to be sequestered, but to stay within the soil. This is what the data says that we have today, but as more data comes out, we do believe that there might be potential for lower rainfall zones, but rainfall is a key consideration for soil carbon potential. Second is, what does your current practice adoption look like? And this is maybe counterintuitive, that the earlier you are in your practice adoption journey, oftentimes the higher soil carbon uplift potential you have. And so rainfall, as well as practice adoption and what's been done on the property to date, are two important indicators we look at to understand your soil carbon potential. But this is really only the first step. Sean, we can go to the next slide. First, understanding potential, and then getting into a bit more detail on, will there be a good return on investment for me in taking a soil carbon project? We talk about this a lot in our cost benefit reports, if you want to go back and watch that webinar, but we'll go through some of the high level metrics here. So first and foremost, try to understand what the value of the carbon credits will be that you could generate. Properties with 500 mils of rainfall or more a year often will generate between 1 in 3, 2 in 4 carbon credits per hectare. That's what you see in these yellow and gray bubbles here on the left-hand side. So that's a per hectare value, and this would be over a 25-year project on average. So depending on, what the carbon credit price ends up being, whether it's $20, $40, $60 more or less, you can see what the calculation for hectare per annum could look like for the property. Now, this is just top line revenue, and it's only carbon value. Where we think it's important for graziers to consider these projects is the practice adoption can also deliver on production uplift as well. So that's increased value to your core business and to your property as an asset. When we look at those who have adopted good practices through Maya grazing, we have seen anywhere from a 5 to 20% uplift in production on average as they improve their practices, but we've also certainly seen far greater improvements than that on a case-by-case basis. Now, we talked about carbon value and production value, but this does come at a cost, and we want people to go into carbon projects with their eyes wide open, that the carbon won't just appear. It's day-to-day practice adoption paired with on-farm investment that can start to deliver these numbers from a carbon credit and production uplift perspective. So on-farm investment, these are things such as water and wire, potentially soil inputs, or pasture development programs. You see on the right-hand side some ranges that we see. For water and wire, it often is around a $500 a hectare cost spread out over 5 years if your property is starting pretty much from zero. For soil inputs, depending if there's a pH imbalance, you might be needing to apply inputs such as lime or gypsum, and this could be anywhere from $50 to $150 a hectare over that initial start of the program. And the same goes for pasture development. There may be weak spots. You may need to add some diversity to your pasture in order to drive more carbon sequestration. And this could be somewhere around $100 a hectare over the first 5 years of the program. So that's on-farm investment. And then there's the general costs of carbon projects, one of the more significant of which is soil baselining and sampling costs. Depending on the size of the property and your location, this could be somewhere between $15 and $25 a hectare. And at the end of the day, the gross margin that you may see in a soil carbon project could be anywhere from 50 to 70%. Now, these are all high-level metrics and really vary depending on the property. So if you're interested in getting these types of calculations run for your property, please send in an EOI for a cost-benefit report, and we can help you. I'll just call out this final view here on the right-hand side, which is the cash flow profile. Soil carbon projects tend to only pay out every 5 years alongside the required offset reporting. Now, as the cost to do soil sampling reduces, there should be the potential for these payments to increase. But right now, you'll be seeing payout about every 5 years. Oh, Sean, can you go to the next slide, please? So once you've run a cost benefit report or done your own desktop analysis, you'll be able to see for your property size and your carbon sequestration potential, whether or not it makes sense for you to move forward. You want your returns to cover the costs of soil sampling and on-farm investment. Now, a desktop report and calculation is really step one. And if that starts to look promising, we do recommend doing a bit more ground truthing on your property. What we do for our blueprint program is we do both digital mapping as well as on-farm soil sampling and pasture sampling to get a better understanding of what the soil looks like on your property. We do a pretty broad spectrum analysis on your soil biology and chemistry, and same goes for pasture across the property. This gives us better insights into some of the key drivers in soil chemistry for building and storing soil carbon. We also help you with understanding the feasibility of practice adoption on your property. If you are starting from scratch or really just starting to understand things such as rotational grazing, we'll show you a demo of our Maya grazing app and put your property data into that. And we'll work alongside you for those 6 months to help you understand what that practice adoption would actually mean from a day-to-day basis and decision-making process for your property. And so this should really help increase your confidence to understand if a soil carbon project is the right choice for you. Next up, I believe we'll go over to Sean.
Thanks, Ashley. So obviously those the cost benefit report and blueprint program are really important ways to better understand your project. But then there's a whole lot of method requirements, and these are things that need to be considered for the whole 25 years of the project. I'll run through a few of these just to give you an understanding of some of the elements. One key concept is additionality. There needs to be at least one new eligible activity, and you can see the eligible activities or the kind of key ones relevant for grazing on the right here. And these have to commence after registration. So there is some sort of rigor applied to this. The idea is that there needs to be something beyond business as usual so that there is additional carbon stored. There are also on-farm activities that are restricted during the life of the project, which you need to be aware of. Destocking is one of these, forest clearing, soil disturbance. There's a broader range, and it isn't necessarily a complete restriction. There's a whole lot of thresholds and exemptions that are associated with this. So again, something you need to be informed about, especially considering the 25 to 30 year commitment, or if you're really keen, you can go to 100. Signing up for a carbon project doesn't mean you can't at some point decide it's not for you. So it's important to know that as well. The one kind of condition on that is if you have received ACCUs, which for a soil carbon project normally first happens at about 5 years, these ACCUs have to be returned to the regulator. It's also possible to sell your property, but then this needs to be taken into consideration. If the buyer wishes to continue the project, which they may well because of the upside in revenue, that's all fine. But if they don't, you'll have to factor in the return of ACCUs in any sale price. So, these are some of the method issues, and understanding if these practices, both the ones you commit to doing and the ones you commit to not doing for 25 years, are right for your property. So I suppose the blueprint program gives you the information and time to work through this before you make a decision. There's a few other bits and bobs in the soil carbon method. Eligibility. So you have to have general eligibility covered off, obviously being the owner or lessee of the land. So you actually have the carbon right. You also need other eligible interest holders to sign off. This could be your bank if you have a mortgage. If there's a resolved native title claim, that'll have to be worked through as well, and other leases. Reg approvals have to be ticked off, although largely if you're a grazier and you're continuing to graze, this shouldn't be a major hurdle, and also natural resource management plan compliance. Then you have to look at your land to see if it's eligible. Land under cropping pastoral fallow is eligible. There has to be an assessment that it's likely to store carbon and you're able to sample soil. And then also there's some areas that are excluded from a project that are ineligible if there's been in the previous 7 years forest clearing, and there's thresholds around that too. And obviously buildings and infrastructure such as that land is kept out of the project. So all the sort of eligibility assessment gets rolled up into a map that is submitted to the regulator. The project areas map the carbon estimation area, which is where the project will happen and the soil carbon will be sampled. And then you have your exclusion areas, and then another piece of the map is emission accounting areas where you're not building soil carbon, but you need to measure any increase in emissions to make sure there's a net gain. Another part is deciding what is the right support model for your soil carbon project. You can definitely go it alone and do a fee-for-service approach where you manage a lot of the aspects of it, or you pay someone to do certain elements. Or you can go into a partnership with a carbon service provider, and that normally happens with some sort of share of ACCUs. And this links quite closely to who becomes the project proponent. So just a few elements to consider in this choice. If you go it alone, obviously you're going to be meeting the upfront ongoing costs of the projects and paying for any services you need. Whereas if you go with a carbon service provider, you come to an arrangement about which parts they will pay for in return for some ACCUs. The carbon expertise, again, you have to buy that in unless you have an arrangement with a carbon service provider. Another important one is liability. If the landholder goes it alone and becomes the project proponent, you're legally liable for the project, including reversal events, which is when carbon storage goes backwards, which we'll cover off later on. Whereas if you go in with a carbon service provider, there's options for them taking on the risk. And just one sort of element of subtlety here, you can basically go in as a co-proponent with the carbon service provider, or you can basically provide them with the right to do the project and they can be the proponent. And again, just that slide goes through some of the options there. We at Atlas Carbon prefer the co-proponent model. It's functionally quite useful, but also it becomes a genuine partnership between the landholder and Atlas Carbon. So both parties share an interest in the success of the project as well as the risks. And it also allows, if the landholder wants to sort of take on sole proponency later on, it's easier to sort of transfer that to them. Ashley, do you want to take this slide?
Yes, I will. So you've gone through some of the key decisions around, okay, I'm going to move forward with a soil carbon project. Now, a carbon project is 25 years. And as we stated, typically you're only checking in and doing a sample report every 5 years. And so what are you going to do to ensure that you're on the right track and doing the right things that are sequestering carbon that's going to deliver value for you and your business? Upfront, you are making some significant investments, particularly in years 1 through 5. You are investing in that infrastructure. You are adopting that new practice as required under the method. And we want to ensure that any graziers that we're working with in this regard, have visibility into the progress that they're making. So we can go into the next slide, Sean. So we believe that tracking your data and interpreting your data to ensure you're doing the right things to store and sequester carbon will be able to provide you with day-to-day confidence that you will be successful in your carbon project. One of the first steps is having a plan for how you're going to build soil carbon. We help build this plan in our blueprint program. And we also help with creating those key grazing plans through our Maya grazing product. Being able to follow a plan on a month-to-month basis, revisit that grazing plan and your rotations and adjust them as rainfall changes will be very key to making sure you are protecting the carbon in your soil and building more. Tracking your activities will help you see improvement in key grazing metrics that we believe drive impact. So the key grazing metrics that we like to track will be your paddock to mob ratio, your rest ratio, and your density. We intro a little bit about what this looks like for your property when we do a cost benefit report for you, and we show how you look compared to benchmarks across all of the Maya graziers that we've worked with over the past 7 years. This gives you a starting view to see where you're at and where you can get to over time. Lastly, being able to observe outcomes through production uplift, we believe is a key indicator to carbon outcomes. Increasing biomass above ground is a good indicator that you are growing roots and carbon deep below ground. Using a product such as Maya grazing to track how that biomass factory is turning on your property is very helpful. We can go to the next slide, Sean. So where can you go to for help? Certainly going out and getting training in the key elements of practice adoption. We work with a group of different providers, including RCS, Nature's Equity, HM educators, and beyond, in order to give a key foundation of training and understanding of rotational grazing. And the team at Maya Grazing can also help get you started. And through our program, whether with just our SaaS subscription and with Atlas Carbon, we provide coaching and regular check-ins to make sure that you're on track and you have someone to speak with who's also a grazier, has been through this. We also, pardon me, through the Maya grazing tool can also see if there's key triggers for action in your data. Sean, back over to you.
Well, thanks, Ashley. Yeah, so it's important to be aware of what the risks to a soil carbon project might be. For this audience, I probably don't need to go into too much detail on overstocking and overgrazing, and Ashley has covered off some of the elements there. But fundamental is good grazing management to get the land condition up, to get the biomass there, and to get the carbon into the soil. And I suppose Atlas does focus on being with you for that journey through Maya grazing, through our support team, to help you plan and deliver that plan. It probably is worth looking at the risks from natural disturbance. Obviously, the grazing aspect is something that is within your control, but drought, fire, flood, these are things that can happen, and it isn't it is not in the hands of the land manager. So obviously, first up, important to be managing for land condition and resilience to minimize any soil carbon loss through these events and allow for rapid recovery. Adjusting for projected rainfall is a big part of this, and important to understand that there will be fluctuations based on natural events. But this is versus the practice changes that occur over 25 years, which build soil carbon over time. So yeah, there are many facets to registering a project. There are many requirements the government have put up there, which are important. So when you do get carbon credits coming from your project, they have credibility, and people will be interested in purchasing them, and the market will recognize them. But registering a project doesn't build soil carbon. It's good grazing management that does. And that's the key focus for Atlas Carbon, working with Maya Grazing to ensure that the practices are put in place which will build carbon over time. Excellent. That's the presentation. quite a quick one today, and we have some time for questions. So I'll stop sharing and maybe Ashley can jump into any questions that have come up, but feel free to put any further questions you have.
Sure. I'll start off with one question we have around the software we use to conduct the analysis under the Blueprint program and cost benefit report. So we definitely are just working with data analysis. We also partner with an organization called FarmLab, which helps to store and manage some of the results of the soil lab data and the pasture data that we take. FarmLab also helps with mapping as well. Next question is confirming. So can you please confirm that previous management changes are not eligible for consideration? Sean, do you want to take that one?
Yes, so there are different methods. There are global methods, there are Australian methods. So I suppose you can look into the requirements of each one. But for Australian soil carbon methods, previous management changes are not eligible. So there's a 5-year baseline period, and the activities that occurred in that baseline period can't be counted for the soil carbon project. You need to start a new activity, and obviously with grazing, you are grazing, so it's changing grazing in a way that is seen as materially different. And there's a range of other activities you can do to do with pasture improvement and providing inputs. But yeah, changes that have been put in place prior to registration can't be counted to a soil carbon project, and they're not seen as additional.
Great. Next question is, in the presentation, you used a 5-year reporting period. Can you do a 12-month reporting period?
Yeah. So basically, 5 years is the maximum period that you can take to do an offset report. You can do it in 1 year, you can do it in 2 years, you can do it a variety of times. It's just taking account of the cost of doing soil sampling. So other methods like veg methods might have it annually, but with the cost of soil sampling at present, it makes more sense to do it every 5 years, so you're not bearing that cost every time and cutting into any sort of profit you might receive. It's going to be a changing space in the future. There's a lot of effort going into bringing down soil sampling costs, so watch the space. But right now, we go with 5 years in most instances for the reason of the cost.
Thanks, Sean. So the next question is around how deep is the soil sampling done by Atlas Carbon? So the method allows for you to measure up to 1 meter at depth, and that's how far we go. This is pretty standard practice across any soil carbon project developer that you'll work with, is to do the max that's allowable under the method, which is 1 meter depth. Let's see, are there any new questions coming in?
That seems to be about it for now, and we're almost at time. But if any questions do come up, please feel free to get in touch, and also to submit an EOI and to even take on doing a free cost benefit report to see how your property may stack up for a soil carbon project.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll be bringing out more webinars around some of the intricacies of running a soil carbon project day to day. So look out for the announcement for those coming through soon. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.